Hello to my air signs Libra, Aquarius, and Gemini. Welcome to the Sagittarius full moon. You'll find the timestamps for your rising signs listed below. Hello Libra Rising, welcome to Gemini season. And this is your reading for the Sagittarius full moon, which is happening very, very soon, Thursday the 23rd of May at 11:55 p.m. if you're in the Southern Hemisphere with me. I've got some info that sort of precedes that and leads us into June as well. So it's kind of what we're standing at, Libra Rising, is like this Gemini season feels like 12 years in the making. The reason I say that is because a couple of days after this full moon, on the 26th of May, if you're down here with me, the planet Jupiter enters Gemini, and they've not done so for 12 years. The last time that Jupiter was in Gemini was June 2012 to July 2013. And so the way that I remember what Jupiter means in astrology is by looking at it. It's big, it's made of gas, it's expansive, it's made of storms. There's a lot of really cool things that Jupiter can bring to us in astrology. It can really magnify, it can really overemphasize, it can ignite in our astrology. The Greek name for Jupiter is Zeus. You can see the sort of Lord of the gods kind of ferocity that Jupiter can bring about. However, Jupiter is more comfortable in Sagittarius, so in opposition to Gemini. And so whenever a planet is far away from their home base, they tend to freak out a little bit, and they can actually emphasize the shadow aspects of the planet. So think about growth at all costs, think about greed. These sorts of topics we can start to talk about when thinking about Jupiter in Gemini. But Gemini teaches us that there's, two sides to every story. And so I think that when in memory, thinking about my life back in June of 2012, July 2013, I can definitely see the emphasis on the shadow aspects of a certain pathway that I was on. And I can definitely remember the beautiful, sweet moments of emphasis of my right pathway too. So think about life way back when up until now, because this is happening. We'll have 1 year of Jupiter in Gemini, and for you on your birth chart, it's your ninth house. So this is your access to your religious fervor, your spirituality, your philosophy. I think that's really kind of lovely to have, the proverbial god of astrology in your house of the gods. There's something quite powerful here. So I wonder, Libra Rising, if you can really think back to June 2012, July 2013, with topics of spirituality in mind. Think about your faith, think about your hope, think about your religious traditions as they were then and how they are now. That might be an interesting link that you can create in your own life with this astrology. So back to the moon though. So on the 23rd of this month, we have a full moon in Sagittarius. And for you, this is your third house, and the moon loves it in the third house. In Hellenistic astrology, the third house was called the house of the goddess. It's a place of private ritual where we sort of enact spiritual healing with voice, rather so much than from textbooks. It's about our village, our neighborhood. And as I said, the moon loves it in the third house because of its ancient connotation of being the house of the goddess. The lunar goddess was at home in the third house. It's kind of a good omen. It's a nice thing for you. Let's look at Venus as well, though, because Venus, as your guiding light, has just made a conjunction with Jupiter on the same day as this full moon. So an expansive beauty, an expansive creativity, thinking about the way that Venus informs our relationship styles and our ideas on coupling and harmonics in relationship. This conjunction's happening in Taurus in your 8th house. So this is your collaborations, how your energy and your resources are invested in that of the other. It feels really sweet. What it kind of looks like to me as well is this sort of like it feels like good preparation. perhaps for you to go a little deeper into your religious studies, your religious practices. When I say religious, let's say spiritual, it's probably a better word. It's a word that's more user-friendly, maybe. Religion seems quite dogmatic, doesn't it? Perhaps in some ways the ninth house does have dogma attached to it, or it can. So yeah, I'd encourage you again to think back to 2012, 2013 and the shifting forms of your spiritual practices. But with this emphasis on the ninth house for you, Libra rising, I think that for the next year, there's going to be some light and some shadow and some big conversations to have around spiritual study. As a little tarot bitch, I've been really unpicking my relationship with not the dogma, but the sort of devotion to this sort of work. Anything that's got a spiritual relationship or a spiritual connotation can fall into a dogmatic practice pretty quickly, and especially in this sort of age of over communication. And this is interesting too, this emphasis on Gemini, which is all about the twins chattering away, the way that we sort of speak to each other and share information. This emphasis, if it's going to be lighting up the good and the bad, the light and the shadow, I'll just give an example. It's sort of like when you sort of pop onto your little black phone or your computer, like, I'll just check my messages, and then 4 hours have gone by and you've just been listening to someone bark at you about whatever 12-step program they've got to sell you, or whatever, how they see doing shadow work. All of these conversations are really helpful and beneficial for fleshing out our empathy for ourselves and for each other, and for providing space to be sweet and be kind about these sorts of things. But so easily it can just grow into this, like, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing that wrong, or you've got to do this, you've got to buy this, do this, do this. It can just feel so claustrophobic. There's a couple of folks that are sort of, and you can probably open the paper and read it too, but this clamping down on the ill effects of social media, communication, the emphasis, or perhaps the magnifying glass on the shadow side of this access, free-flowing access to information that the culture has at present. These things might be showing up more directly over the next year that Jupiter through Gemini is taking too. So just keep all of that in mind. I really feel for folks that feel called to share what they know. I'm a Gemini moon, so it's kind of part of my body. I have to sort of be in communication in some capacity. But there's the, and you use your prowess too. If either your actions are in good faith, or you're receiving information from someone who is working from good faith, or not. And it's just about fine tuning and sort of stripping away some of the glamour too. Says me, but you understand what I mean. It's sort of like you can tell when someone's pulling your leg or not. Perhaps as a Libra rising, you kind of want to hear everyone out. And so this emphasis on the conversations around spiritual studies, spiritual practices, sharing, there's an encouragement here for you to go through the roster maybe, or just double check what you're ingesting, what you're absorbing. I went through a very vital period recently of just kind of unsubscribing from, just refining what I was intaking, because these things, they're so addictive. It's designed as it's using the same technology as a slot machine. So no more TikTok for me. I had it for a couple of months to see if I could expand my business. It didn't, and it was the only platform that I was abused on. So goodbye. I never looked at it. It's maddening to have that shouting and that continual Rolodex for me. I get too overly stimulated and addicted to it. So that's just one example. like goodbye, doesn't change my life or my business in any way. Just think about that. Think about the quality of either what you're putting out or what you're ingesting, and make sure that that's tip top. And perhaps there's something here about Venus and Jupiter sort of coming together in your 8th house of this sort of collaborative effort. There might be some beautiful examples that you can see, or lovely messages that you receive. You're like, this is what I kind of really enjoy. This is the area that I want to work in, or this is how I want to craft my offerings to in this style rather than in this pokies. We call poker machines pokies in Australia. Yeah. And the reason I can be so critical is because I'm friggin' an addict so easily. I really do. It's my Gemini moon, like, obsess over things. Sometimes I can fall so easily into a bad habit pattern. And I've got to remind myself that I can also fall just as easily into a really healthy habit pattern too. So that's my advice. Let's get you some tarot as I look at the other astrology. Okay, so on the 30th, so let's keep this in mind. You can write it down if you want to. So the 23rd, we have the full moon. That's probably today. And that's also the Venus-Jupiter conjunction. So keep your eyes peeled in your collaborations or in your networks to see who is like speaking the truth rather than the bullshit. And then on the 26th, we have Jupiter enter into Gemini. So this is the beginning point for you, Libra rising, of this year of emphasizing the light and shadow of your religious and spiritual practices. And then on the 30th, the planet Mars will make a conjunction with Chiron back over in Aries. So this is back in your 7th house of your relationships. Remember this ongoing process of uncovering this unconscious wounding around your relationship styles. It's going to be hit with a bit of bravery on the 30th. So Mars is really happy in Aries. Mars does its best work in Aries and Scorpio. So hopefully there's a bit of courage that we can glean from Mars and Chiron in that conjunction. So that's the 30th of May. Let's get you some tarot from this one, I think. I sometimes also, sorry, just on the topic of like, as a content creator, I was just looking at all the things that I have to check. Like I'm talking to myself in a room alone, which my Gemini moon's kind of fine for because I'm talking to myself all the time anyway, so why not put it out loud? But I was just checking all of the different things that I'm sort of monitoring, and that sort of like, I find it fascinating how the machinery has us around its little finger. It's just like we are so reliant on it. My livelihood is based on this sort of stuff, that and minding puppy dogs. So there'll be emphasis on all of these things for good and for bad. I'm really I remember when all of this, getting my first smartphone, and back in the days when I was a stripper, and it was great for visibility. It was great for being self-employed. It was great for that sort of stuff, for networking and communicating. Now I sometimes can't even concentrate because everything is an ad, and I'm seeing people that I've never heard of before but have paid for my views, and it's too much. So I think that you'll probably be hearing a bit more of that too throughout this Jupiter transit of Gemini. This is too much. It's too much. So it might be a nice invitation, Libra rising, to pass back a little bit, to sort of really think about, you want to cover all bases. That's what the culture tells us to. You've got to cover everything. Have this, have this, have this, have this. Or do you just need this and make it really good? That's just one thing to think about too. So I got the Devil and I got the Chariot and I got the Six of Swords. So when I see these two cards together, I think about the beautiful dance between Capricorn and Cancer, and that lovely polarity of pragmatism and of like nurturing, like sentimentality. To look on your birth chart, this is your 10th house and your 4th house, your privacy, and and your public-facing self, your visibility. And so if I look further at your visibility, I can see, I think, sometimes these tarot cards can just really qualify what we were talking about before, and I really like that. It's really helpful, and that's just the magic of it. Move away from the anxiety, move away from the space that feels like it's too much. If you've got a list of things that you need to accomplish as far as, this platform, that platform, the other platform, I've got to, if you're not in the business of creating, if you're consuming and you're watching this, watching that, and you check in with your body and check in with yourself and be like, how does that make me feel? Anxious? Cut it away. The Six of Swords speaks about that necessity to create a mental boundary. Sometimes we really do have to sort of use our foresight to protect ourselves and to move on, to move away from something that feels really turbulent. And when I look at these two together, there is a sort of forward activation with the Chariot too. There is something so brave about leading from the heart, leading from the vulnerability of oneself. It can also freaking wring it out of you. And so when in private world, when at home, when in safety and security, that's kind of the place that you sort of want to be vulnerable and to be nurtured. But perhaps because of the work, because of the access that folks have to you on the public-facing self, there might be some limitations sometimes for you at home in being able to really open up and to really enjoy and to really nurture. And that's just the way the die is cast with your birth chart, Libra Rising. It's sort of not your fault, but I think that this chat about sort of boundaries around what you're absorbing and putting out there, what you're giving away for free as well, might be something that we can really speak to, because I have a feeling that if you continue down on the same track as you are now, it's going to reach a breaking point. And I think that possibly Gemini might rear its uglier head with this expansiveness that Jupiter, it's like Jupiter's investigating this thing. And this isn't to say that I have a feeling that we'd get along if you enjoy my work. There's something of a nice exchange here. I think that your heart is in the right place, Libra Rising. It's just a matter of refining your boundaries and refining your necessity. Let me just finish this off in a really simple way. We are told that growth at all costs is the system which we have to work under. Gemini and Jupiter are examining that right now. If we look to Gemini as being the way that we are communicating at present globally, Jupiter is like, is this really such a good thing? You tell me. You tell me. Do you need to be reading that paper, that Substack, that this, that? How many hours are you devoting or developing your intimacy with your machinery? And how many hours are you devoting your intimacy to your flesh and blood? And just measure that. That's the reading, my love. Love you. Love you lots. If you're still here with me and you'd like me to read your birth chart, make yourself an appointment at umaruby.com. I will draw you a birth chart that looks like this, and I will read it to you. If you'd like to support my work here in Horoscope Land, please head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby, and you can send me some tip money there, or you can subscribe for $10 Australian a month, and that supports the production of these horoscopes. I will speak to you about the new moon in Gemini in a couple of weeks, and this is going to be our moment to sow some seeds in that 9th house of yours. So this is going to be an activation of potential where you want to see yourself in this world, after perhaps a little bit of feeling the effects of what Jupiter has to say in your spiritual self too. That's it. It's so funny as well. I'll just flag this one last little thing before I go. It's all well and good for me to sit here through a computer screen and say, get off the computer. I get the weird complexity and paradox of that. Hopefully there'll be time in the future where we can all gather in the town square or in the field and hold hands and put daisies in each other's hair and just love one another. And that's when electricity fails finally, and we have to go back to fire and air and earth and water. I'm a hippie. I trust that you are too, somewhere in there. Bye, Libra. Hello, Aquarius Rising. Welcome to Gemini season. And I've got a reading here for you for the Sagittarius full moon, which I think is happening tonight, if I get these out in time, or it could be the night before, but who cares? It's on the Thursday, the 23rd of May at 5 minutes to midnight. So if you're watching this after the fact, it doesn't matter, because I've got some information that is going to lead us into June as well. This is a powerful Gemini season. The sun has just entered into Gemini, and a couple of days after, the planet Jupiter will also enter Gemini. And so when we think about Jupiter, we think about its size. We think about what it's made of. It's made of gas. We think about what gas does, how it operates. It expands, it grows, it emphasizes, it lifts off. And so this is one way that you can remember what Jupiter kind of means in astrology. Jupiter's another name for Zeus, so, sort of Lord of the gods, that kind of thing. Growth, abundance, all of that beautiful stuff. Hope is actually probably a really good word for Jupiter as well. The trick is that Jupiter is actually not so comfortable in Gemini, simply because it's in a sign so Gemini is opposite Sagittarius on the zodiac, and Jupiter is the planet that loves it in Sagittarius. So it's kind of uncomfortable. It's not on its home base. Jupiter in Gemini can actually be quite frenetic. If we think about the split in the twins of Gemini, we think about the light and the shadow, the polarity, the conversation that occurs in Gemini. With Jupiter in there, those sorts of topics can really be expanded upon. But that isn't to say that everything is dark, it's kind of like everything, it's like more chatting, more understanding, more picking apart. I think back to the last time that Jupiter was in Gemini, which was from June 2012 to July 2013. That was a very pivotal part of my life. There was a lot of growth and expansion, and there was a lot of magnification on what was important in my life and perhaps wasn't so important. There was a certain way that I was faced, and Jupiter in Gemini really expanded and emphasized where I was actually supposed to be headed, or what would soothe me, that I was actually down a pathway that was not so good. So you can see it emphasize the shadow in order to remind me of my direction. On your birth chart, Gemini rules over your 5th house of your self-expression, your sexuality, and your access to joy. So I actually kind of think that we can work with this in a really effective way. I'm going to give you some advice that I was given only hours ago. Move the body. When anxiety strikes, which can often happen when we're speaking about Gemini is rife with ideas and chatter, which can lead to anxiety. I've been finding that my technique of waking up, having a ciggy, having a little espresso to try and get the motor started is kind of fine. Do whatever you want to, but if that's all that you're doing, and you're sort of doing that in order to try and shift something physically to make yourself feel alive or energized, it's only going to sort of flood the heart and have your heart palpitate. You need to move and exercise, and you probably already do, Aquarius. I'm probably singing to the choir, but that's just a bit of advice, just direct from my life to yours. It takes a moment sometimes to flip a switch and to be like, oh, that's the answer. Oh, that's right. I love to move around. I love to express myself in this way. I like to kind of move energy in this way. To move energy and to express yourself in the fifth house can be kind of a bit sexy. I understand that not everybody has a sexuality. That's completely valid. The aces in the room can testify to that. However, what I'm sort of talking about is that kind of creative flow, being able to move around a little more if there's some room cleared. Everything that we sort of hold in our bodies can then turn into pain. It can turn into ailments, can't it? If we don't address it, if we don't move it. Perfect advice for Gemini season. Now let's refocus and let's look over to this moon, okay? So I think I've got it just in time. Enjoy it, sit underneath it, express yourself, and really keep in mind your sense of belonging in the community. Keep in mind your humanitarian spirit, Aquarius Rising. It's dark days at the moment when considering our relationship to the human species. I understand that. The salve to that sort of ailment is digging a little bit deeper and remembering the beauty and the majesty of the human species too, how we do come together and how we do try our best to articulate ourselves and our experience of the world around us, and how we create from that articulation, or how we create from that perspective as well. It's a nice dance between the 11th and the 5th house. You can see the 5th is about you and how you express yourself, how you move around in this world, how you move the energy. And the 11th is how everybody else does, and how your sort of part to play in a greater whole can manifest. So when there's a spotlight on any of our houses, we can give thanks, we can cry our tears, we can move along. Whatever worked or didn't work from what you've been building in your 11th house, your friendship networks. Maybe there's some things that need to be addressed in your friendship dynamics. That's something that you can express at a full moon, but keep in the back of your mind that it is a full moon, so everyone's waters will be running hot. But this moon seems pretty. Well, actually, looking at it, Aquarius Rising, there might be something further to your Plutonian evolution that might be worth mentioning or sharing with other folks. Because I'm looking at this now, and the Sun is at 2 degrees of Gemini, and Pluto retrograde is at 2 degrees of Aquarius. So air sign to air sign, that's a direct line of support. That's called a trine. So they're speaking to each other in a helpful kind of way. There's another aspect that occurs in the stratosphere. It's called a sextile. I don't mention them very much because it's I guess Venus is the one that really works with sextiles quite strongly. But I will mention it here because the moon is sextile with Pluto too. And because this is your first house, it's very personal to yourself. And we know that we've been prepping you for this quest, this journey into the underworld, however that may manifest over the next 20 years. You know, it's a big story, and I don't wish to labor you with any fear about this. It's just from my experience of a Pluto transit, it's still really fresh in my mind, and that's still something that I contend with. And I really am grateful for it, grateful for the opportunity that Pluto provided for me in my life. But you're just beginning this story. And so when thinking about your individual self-expression, your sexuality, the way that you create, you know, make art for art's sake, pleasure for pleasure's sake, and thinking about your humanitarian concerns, is there a link with what you're going through as an individual, perhaps on like a spiritual sort of internal level? I'm on a roll. That's what my tummy always tells me. Forgive me. There's something of your evolution that's speaking to both of these parts of your life. And now that I've said it, that just seems massive. That seems really huge. So I don't wish for you to feel like, oh, I'm doing the astrology wrong. But just keep all of these as offers in the back of your mind as you experience the moon. I'm not sure what you're doing that night. You might be out, you might be with friends, you might be with a lover, who knows? But there's something here about your evolution that's speaking to the way that you creatively, sensually, sexually express yourself as well. I have been given some really, really sound sage advice by multiple people quite recently that creative energy is really linked to sexual energy too. And if there's a blockage there in some way, or if there's a resistance to that in some way on either side, they can inform and affect one another. I think that's a really great way to read the definition of the fifth house, art and sex. And yeah, just, very personal note. I'm getting there. I'm working through what I need to work through. And it's been a long journey, years in the making, about my relationship to both of these things. And yeah, if I can give you any advice, I'm a Pisces rising, and a Capricorn sun, but Pluto does feel spooky at times. And it's only in the aftermath of my experience with Pluto was I even conscious to it. I didn't know. It took another astrologer to teach me and sort of open up my vocabulary for all of this stuff too. The journey to the underworld is worth it. It's difficult, but you've got lanterns of support if only you know to look for them. The tarot card that I got here, just as I'm sort of speaking to you about this, is the Eight of Wands. So that's where the moon is in our zodiac. The moon is kind of highlighting, spotlighting this card. And there's, as you can see, 8 direct magical messages all facing in the same direction. So you can use that as impetus, perhaps to speak your truth to community, to topics around your humanitarian spirit. Also, focus on the idea that Jupiter will be expanding your sex and art place. And think about how you remember that expansion from June 2012 to July 2013, and reflect on that period of your life and either look forward to a development of that, or remember that you've learned some lessons since then around your relationships to your creative sexual essence as well. I'm filming these today. This is more personal astrology, but my Chiron placement is at 28 degrees of Taurus. And right now, you never guess, Venus is at 28 degrees of Taurus. And so I'm feeling really, finally, encouraged. I'm feeling tickled by Venus. The Chiron wound, the pain points, are being examined in a very gentle, careful, beautiful, caressing kind of way. And I'm not going to have any more coffee today too. Perhaps some nostalgia might rear its head as I speak about June 2012 to July 2013 and your embodiment, your creative, artistic, sexual embodiment. There might be some nostalgia that sort of crops up. There might be something that you're thinking about, maybe perhaps even like a version of yourself or a way that you moved around the world that was different to perhaps the way that you have the confidence to move around now. And that could just simply be something of, age, development, that kind of thing. Our fire does sort of tend to temper over time. But it could also be something about a reignition too, because I can see that we're sort of moving away from we're moving away from like, we're moving away from just chasing it at all costs. That's in the past. When you set your eyes on the prize and you're like, right, target spotted, yes, goal reached, everything else can sort of fall by the wayside. I'm devoted to this. That can be really exhilarating. And Lord knows I've lived most of my romantic life with that as my guiding light. Like, right, that's what I'm doing. Drop everything, sell everything, move to a different country. There's nostalgia that I can feel around that, and I kind of look back with fondness. I don't regret any of my choices at all. It's interesting to think about this timeline too. There's a lot of stuff that happened around this time. But as I'm an adult now, a proper grown-up, I think that there's something about resting in the riches of my experience. And definitely this relationship with myself is the most important one. And so if you can sit there, Aquarius rising, and think to yourself, and there's so many folks that say, the healing journey is it's complex and it's rife with contradictions, because everyone's sort of like, I've got to do my healing work before I enter into something else again. Or, you don't have to be fully healed. Don't deny yourself the pleasures of life. I think this story in the tarot, this is the 9 of Pentacles. So it is speaking about kind of the glow of contentment in one's own company, and the pride that you can feel about what you've tended to by yourself. And I would probably take this as, you'll do whatever you bloody want to, and Jupiter is going to probably expand upon a little bit of this individual self-expression, and you'll do whatever you want to, chase whatever you need to chase. The tarot is just saying right now, Aquarius rising, that as we journey along, you'll find that it'll be easier to be alone. Some of us do jump from relationship to relationship, or, situationship to situationship. They're very frightened of being alone. And some of us, some others, say to themselves, well, actually, I'm better off alone. I'm terrible at this. I lose myself. All of these perspectives are sort of valid, aren't they? You can understand why someone might think about themselves in that way. You can understand when someone's so used to the company of somebody else that they're going to journey out and try and find, the replacement, or the sort of, to fill that void. Funny thing that we're having this chat in Gemini season, though, with this emphasis on you as an individual, and the split that occurs anyway. I mean, we're alone, but we're never really alone, because there's so many of us living in there. We're always chatting to ourselves, and I think those 3 cards. So you got the Chariot, you got the 9 of Pentacles, and you got the 6 of Cups in the center, which speaks to me of this sort of like remembrance of times past. Whatever you're doing, use this moon to work through these feelings of belonging in a group, and probably reach out to your mates too, the ones that you really love, and look forward to this next year is going to be expanding upon your creative outlets, your relationship to your own, creative and erotic energy. So that's a really nice 9 of Pentacles image too. I'm sure that the 9 of Pentacles isn't sort of living on top of a mountain by themselves. I'm sure they've got company from time to time, but there's something about their relationship and their sort of wholeness, this feeling of wholeness by themselves, which can't be replaced, and can't be affected by their relationship status. I love you, Aquarius Rising. If you're still here with me, can you please put a golden heart in the comments in honor of all of this lovey-dovey stuff we've been speaking about? Let's speak about it more. That's what Gemini season really wants us to. Probably for the next year, there's going to be an overemphasis on communication and conversation. It's what Gemini loves. So more of that, and let's roll with the light and the dark of that too. If you'd like me to draw your birth chart, they look like this. You can make your appointment for a reading with me at umaruby.com. That's my website. If you'd like to support my work, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby. And I will be with you and we'll speak about the Gemini new moon, which is the next lunation coming up. And this will be sort of a seed sowing moment insofar as your ability to self-express, to create, to be sensual with yourself. And Jupiter will be in company, will be right there too. So I'd love to see how the rest of May folds out for you, and I'd love to see what we can look forward to moving forward. Bye. Hello, Gemini Rising. Welcome to Gemini season. And this is your reading for the Sagittarius full moon happening tonight on Thursday, the 23rd of May at 5 minutes to midnight. So I've made it just in time once more, and I've got a lot of information leading us up into June as well. First of all, how are you feeling? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling ready to celebrate yourself? Are you feeling the time is now to emphasize all of your Gemini skills, traits, qualities, blessings, and curses? The reason I say that is I'll get to the moon in a minute, but a couple of days after, on the 26th of May, we have one of the outer planets, one of the most impressive outer planets, moving into Gemini, and that's Jupiter. Jupiter is the big gassy giant in our galaxy, the one with the big red beauty spot, the one that is sort of made of storms. And it's moving into Gemini, and it hasn't been in Gemini for roughly 12 years. In fact, the last time that Jupiter was in Gemini was June 2012 to July 2013. So when we think about Jupiter in astrology, we think about expansion. The easiest way to think about that is what the planet is made of: gas. Gas expands, gas grows, gas lifts off, doesn't it? And to have this sort of encouragement in Gemini, so if you're a Gemini rising, this is your first house of yourself, your soul's rising intention, it's pretty powerful. So before we get to the moon, let's just have a think about your life, June 2012 to July 2013, and think about what showed up, what appeared, what growth occurred during that period of time for you as far as your sort of identity, maybe? About your essence, your Gemini self. Gemini gets a really hard rap, and I can say this with a clear conscience because I am a Gemini moon, and I understand the complexity of such obvious duality. There's a light and a shade to every single human being that walks planet Earth. Folks with Gemini placements sometimes have that split or that duality really emphasized in their life. And perhaps in some way, Jupiter might be here putting a magnifying glass on that split or on that duality, that light shade, that bitch twin, sweet twin kind of vibe. Let's work with the idea that Jupiter itself is also on uncharted territory in Gemini. They're in a place that they're not incredibly comfortable in. They're much better in Sagittarius, which is opposite to you in your 7th house, where the moon will be, put a pin in it, and also in Pisces, which is your 10th house, your most public-facing self. Those are the two signs that the planet Jupiter holds rulership over, or is like the, as Channing Nicholas says, the planetary space holder. So when in Gemini, it's in opposition and in square to the places that it actually is of better help or better use. However, it still does its thing. And perhaps when we think about topics like growth, expansion, size, we know that all of those topics have a real shadow to them as well. Living at this point in history's evolution, we can think about things like growth at all costs as being one of the marks of our generation. We're kind of waking up to this idea that excess and growth and consumption at all costs doesn't work. It actually has a finite moment that it needs to end before we can start to regenerate more. That's not the natural way of this planet, is just take. There needs to be some sort of balance there. So all of that is to say that you, of all people, Gemini Rising, probably have a really good handle on the light and the shadow of growth, expansion, excess. So it's in this next year. So Jupiter will spend 1 year in your first house. We're beginning it on the 26th of May. So look forward to it and kind of think to yourself too that in some way this expansion draws emphasis to the shadow because of the difficulty that Jupiter is feeling in Gemini. It also is going to bring emphasis to the light too. It's a matter of cohering both of these elements in ourselves. It's about sort of breaking down the proverbial binary, as it were, and really incorporating both into our spirit, our matter. So that's the 26th. It's pretty big stuff. And I was almost going to give just the reading on Jupiter in Gemini, but there is so much other stuff that's occurring around, sort of bookmarking this moment, that we've got to get to it. And this is, time to celebrate the full moon too. So let's take the focus off the first house for the second, and let's look over to the seventh house, your relationships, your lovers, your nearest and dearest kin, who you would hold close and do anything for. This is where the spotlight is at this full moon. So we know that at a full moon, emotions run high. We know that at a full moon, everyone gets really razzed up and really led by the moon, whether they're conscious to it or not. I suspect that this period of time, perhaps this week, perhaps the rest of May, you can reach out to every single person that you would consider a part of your seventh house, and you'd be like, hello, hi, maybe it's been a while, no problem. I just needed to let you know how much I adore you and how much I've been thinking of you and how much your influence makes my life better. That would be just the best way to spend the last week of May if I were you, Gemini Rising, because as much as we are individual, self-contained vessels, what's the point of living unless it's in collaboration or conjunction with the other? This is the beautiful pattern that astrology can sometimes teach us, that figure eight between the polarities. Gemini and Sagittarius actually have a lot to say to one another and a lot of encouragement that they can give one another as well. So using the power of this moon, I think that might be just a great invitation for you. I'm looking at one of the tarot cards that I pulled out to describe this moment in time, and I pulled out the Eight of Wands because at 2 degrees of Sagittarius, the first wedge, the first slice of the pie of Sagittarius, we have the Eight of Wands, which is direct, quick, fast-moving, magical messaging. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 wands moving in the same direction in perfect synchronicity. So I'd take this as your instruction. Now that sounds too bossy. I'd take this as your invitation to make those phone calls, write those letters, send those emails, whatever it is that you need to do, just to check in with those that you might consider to be part of your seventh house, part of your relationship zone. Now, as I said, the moon is happening at midnight, 5 to 12, if you're in the southern hemisphere with me. So during the day, there's a great sort of dance that's happening in Taurus, and also a sort of reaching out or a speaking to Pisces as well. So to smooth out and just to explain it really clearly, let me just quickly look at what's going on here. What I feel is that the planet Venus is throwing a party, or in conjunction with Jupiter, is bringing some sort of finish to these Taurian themes that we've been speaking about for months and months and months now. Taurus is your 12th house, remember? So your unconscious reality, what is sort of behind the curtain, the parts of you that are able to traverse in your dreams and that sort of thing. And we know that there's been a great revolution that's been going on in that part of your life as well, Gemini. There's been things that you've been, stories that you've been retelling yourself, or perhaps changing the narrative privately. Jupiter is about to leave Taurus and enter into Gemini, as we said at the beginning of the reading. But before they do, Venus and Jupiter come into exact conjunction at 29 degrees of Taurus, which just feels really powerful and feels really heavenly. So perhaps dig a little deeper in your definition of your 7th house, your relationships, your loved ones, those that you would consider your like soul sisters, your family. And it doesn't have to be blood related at all, but the ones in your life that you have such affection for, and that you would like to perhaps even kind of expand upon that affection as well. Remember that Sagittarius is actually really good with Jupiter. So perhaps there's something that we can learn from your relationships, or perhaps your relationship style too, that will help us through this next year on this quest of growth. I'm going to get you some tarot, I think, Gemini. Also, just a little bit of advice for Gemini season. Shake your sillies out when things get clogged up, when the anxiety starts to grow. That's been obvious, it's obvious advice, but it's advice that sometimes I don't take. And I find myself in my body sort of with such feelings of fear and worry and then annoyance. I can sort of check my emotions off a list sometimes. And this feeling of like being really annoyed shows up right before I get really sad. And it's my inability to feel myself in the planet, in my relationships, in my access to joy can sometimes be limited because I have allowed the anxiety to stiffen my body. And when I don't move it, it just gets worse. And then I start drinking coffee to try and get that feeling of vibrancy back. And it just makes my heart, palpitations. Down here in the south too, it's sort of Gemini season is always quite chilly. It's quite cold. So there is that sort of want to sort of like hibernate and to get warm and to go inward too. Like if you don't go for a run in the morning or the night, I'd highly recommend that you do. Even if you just, like I did today, jump around in the kitchen with your mum and shake your sillies out. It helps. It helps to move some especially if you're feeling blocked creatively, it helps to move some of that around. And as Geminis, there's so much that goes on here, isn't there? There's so much analysis and sort of over-articulation of our air qualities. I think too, because I'm a Gemini moon, it's in direct relationship to my body. I have to speak about how I'm feeling. I also have to move my body in order to clear my mind. And I'm sure that that's advice that everyone can take, particularly our Geminis. Look at those three: Ace of Cups, Death, and the Moon. Let's have a real think about this full moon in Sagittarius, Gemini Rising, and let's think about the revolutions that your partnership styles are going through. Let's think about the ways that you do share yourself, share your heart, your body, your mind, your thoughts with other people, and let's really be extra specially super proud of ourselves at the development in that area. Let's use this spotlight, this moon in Sagittarius, to really shine the light, obviously, on who it is that you love, and pick apart the inability, perhaps sometimes, that you have in articulating that idea. It's funny to say to a Gemini, I've got an inability to articulate. That's often it's not, you hear my stomach is going, it's agreeing with me. What I'm trying to say is that there's so much conversation that Gemini engages in with themselves, and with other people, that sometimes they can second guess their right answer. Does that make sense to you? It's sort of like, oh, I really feel this way about you. Oh, but do I? Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that, or I shouldn't give this away because what if this happens? There's an over-analysis. Analysis paralysis can really happen in the sign of Gemini. But what these cards are telling me is that whatever this Ace of Cups is, this offer of love, has been received in a very different way than perhaps you were capable of before, or you allowed yourself before. And the moon in Sagittarius, so I'll give you that date again, the 23rd of May, midnight, is the time to say thanks. It's the time to express, pass the cup over, share that love with other people, babe, and don't be frightened. And as a very good friend of mine said to me very recently, everything's made of sand. Nothing lasts forever. It's okay. Enjoy what you have while you have it. Oh, gosh. That felt really nice to get out. I love you, Gemini Rising. If you're still here with me, can you please put a... what do I want in the comments? I want a great big yellow heart. Yeah. A great big yellow love heart in the comments. If you're still here, let me know how you've been feeling. And if you wanted to make contact with me over the internet, I can draw your birth chart and it will look something like this. You can make an appointment with me to read that to you at my website, umaruby.com. If you'd like to support my work, you can head to buymeacoffee.com/umaruby and subscribe, or you can throw some money in the tip jar. I love you very much, Gemini. I'll be with you soon to talk about the new moon in Gemini. So this will be a seed sowing moment for us in our sense of self, and it will be after the fact. So I'd love to hear how Jupiter is rubbing off on you around that time as well. Take it easy, take care, move the body, move it around, get it out. Creativity can sometimes get a bit clogged up if the instrument is a bit stiff. So loosen it up. I love you.